Good afternoon. Today I want to share a little about how to set up heart rate zones in a reasonable way. I recommend using the Karvonen heart rate calculator. If you've been following the chat, um, then you will have seen I shared this at one point. Using Google search engine, if you just typed in Karvonen Formula calculator, you should reach this web page. This calculator is hosted on Top End Sports, and I like it because um, if you enter just a few numbers, it will quickly spit out your heart rate zones. Here there are 5 zones. So let's see how this works. So there's a little bit of note here. The above calculator is based on the following formula. Target heart rate intensity zone equals maximum minus resting heart rate into percentage intensity, the whole thing plus your resting heart rate. Okay, you can read more about this below the page. The person who came up with this, or who's credited with this, his name is Marty Karvonen. I believe he was uh, a physiologist, sports scientist from Finland back in the 1930s, 1940s. So it's been here for a long time, and I would generally say that this formula is uh, much better methodology to use over the max over the zones based on a maximum heart rate. Yeah, there are zones you can construct using percentages of maximum heart rate, and I don't generally recommend that. I like the Karvonen formula because the zones are based on the available reserve between your maximum and your resting heart rate, which is the available working area you have for your heart. And this formula is based on that. Anyway, quickly, how does this work? What does it need? It needs your resting heart rate and your maximum heart rate. So enter those minus 60 and 202. Yours is going to be obviously different. So enter what your body works with, and then hit calculate, right? And then gives you 5 zones and the high and the low values for those zones. So for example, my zone 3, 70 to 80% is 159 to 174 beats per minute. Um, and zone 2 is 145 to 159 beats per minute. Zone 2 and zone 3 are good regions to be when you are training endurance, long duration endurance and tempo sessions. Anything above zone 4, for example, like 90% of heart rate, and you are generally past your lactate threshold, which is the point beyond which you lose your oxidative metabolic control and lactate starts accumulating in the bloodstream. And as a result, the amount of time you can sustain that intensity is going to be finite. In other words, you're not going to be lasting a lot of time in that high intensity. Maybe at best 30 minutes to an hour. An hour maybe if you work at threshold, but certainly less than 30 minutes if you're somewhere here, um, 95, 100% of maximum heart rate. So therefore, when we train in those areas, we typically go and train with short intervals or short repeats. Okay. So next thing is, what do you do when you have these numbers? Well, take these numbers and you will need to put them inside your watch. Any advanced sports watch these days, like a full-fledged triathlon watch, for example, would have a software or an online application in which you can go into and set custom heart rate zones. For example, I use Polar, and Polar uses the Polar Flow application. So I log into that and I click on running, which is the sport profile that I've set up for running, and then I can go in there and set custom zones and enter the numbers as I see fit. So for example, I would take the numbers from this calculator and put them in here. The beauty of that is I won't have to use the default Polar zones that Polar thinks is good for me. I don't really prefer that. I like the custom zones based on Karvonen, and I will enter that there. By the way, if you have any lab test values or lab test data from actual testing by a trained technician or a sports physiologist, that would be a much better a solution for custom zones. That would be like your highest level of customization from actual testing. You would enter actual test data from here, which they can advise you. And of course, there are many other features in within the application. For example, Polar gives me a option to display heart rate as simply beats per minute, or it can help, or as percentage of maximum, or as a percentage of heart rate reserve. I like the third option, just so I can correspond that with the Karvonen formula and see where I am operating in, rather than just see a beats per minute. Cool. So then you can hit save, and remember to sync this information with your watch, otherwise it's pretty much useless. All this data you've just put in is not communicated to the watch, so you need to sync it wirelessly over Bluetooth with your watch. Okay, you can do that um, by using the phone app, or also use a direct cable, um, by hooking the cable USB to your uh, computer and one to your watch, and you can sync it that way as well. Right, hopefully this gives you a quick overview of heart rate zones, what I recommend, and how you can set it up in your watch. Any questions, please let me know. Thank you.